Hello, Composition 2 students. I want to walk you through some ideas on how to brainstorm and write your essay number 1 for our EG 102 class, discussing the Harari essay. So as you are beginning, let's see, and actually I'm going to refer to parts of chapter 2 as I'm going through this. You should read chapter 2 in the next week and make some notes in that for your annotation score for next week, and this should help you as well. So let's see, pages 31 and 32 go through how some ideas on how to get you started, and if you have questions for me, it gives you some ideas on how to be specific with those questions. But the first thing that I want to address here is that as you begin the paper, remember that part of your job in this essay is to fill the reader in on Harari's point. So there's that second full paragraph on page 33. I think talks about this quite a bit. As a general rule, however, you want to give your reader enough information about the source to understand your point. When a student is given a source to write about in EG 102, they often make the mistake of writing to an audience that has read the article, such as the teacher. However, what your instructor often wants of you is not to assume the reader has read the article, but fill the reader in on the article while you perform your chosen task, analyzing, arguing, synthesizing, etc. Hence, part of your job as a writer with sources is to fill your reader in on the source, introduce and summarize it as you make your argument with the source. Though do be careful, you can add too much summary into your paper, so you want to balance the source summary with the purpose of your paper. So I'll walk you all through that, especially when we get to the outlining part. So as you're beginning the paper, you want to introduce the article as well as Harari and the main point. And I'll give you an example of that here in a few minutes. You want to, and so this means you start with an introduction and a brief summary of the text, probably just 3 or 4 sentences. You can use parts of the summary that you turn into me this week as a part of your rough draft. So maybe you have a couple of sentences you're starting with that you think would work, or maybe even the whole top of your summary you think would work. Excuse me, I have the hiccups. Then you could indeed make that into the first part of your paper if you so choose. And then you want to decide on your general trajectory. Are you going to build on Harari's arguments with your own examples, or are you going to argue with him in some way? You don't necessarily need to know where you're going when you start with all of this, but do start to work on maybe your body paragraphs or do a free write, and that will kind of help you figure out your trajectory. If you kind of agree with him and you want to build on his ideas by putting forth some of your own examples, or if you want to argue with his ideas. So let me just show you some potential outlines here that could help. I suppose first off, let's just say that since this is like a 3 to 5 page paper, I would recommend planning probably 4 body paragraphs. And so that you're keeping your summary and argument balanced, you're probably going to want 2 of these to discuss Harari's argument, but at least 2 of them should discuss your own example or point. You could probably get away with 1 of them discussing Harari and then kind of transitioning into your own point. I think it kind of depends on how you want to set up the paper, but in the end, I will be looking for, about half of your body paragraphs to be kind of making your own point and analysis, whether that is posing your own examples and explaining them, or whether that is, arguing with him and saying why you don't think he is correct. So I do have some really brief outlines that I have made. These are not the only options for the paper. You don't have to use these at all. Maybe you have a totally different idea, and that's fine. But if you're stuck, I think these could help you as a starting point. Let's see. And actually, if you keep flipping, Pre-writing and outlining is talked about on page 35 and 36, and they say some of the same things through here that I have just said. So looking back through that might give you some more ideas on how you might brainstorm for your paper. You might also kind of work through some of your journal entries. I've written those to help you get ideas for your paper. So let's see, I'm going to go through, I don't know if I'll have time to make it through all three of these before I have to stop this video and start the second one, because it takes forever to upload these to YouTube if I make them too long. But we'll make it through at least this first one here. So if you are wanting to build on Harari, meaning that you're kind of wanting to agree with him and just explain his argument and then build on it with your own examples. So we're going to start with our brief summary and thesis. You could have some other general point to start and then summarize him, maybe 3 or 4 sentences in, that's fine, and then have your thesis. If you don't know what your thesis is at this point in the paper, that's fine, right? But just know that you do need that thesis in the introduction for this paper. And so then, maybe explain Harari's general point. We've only given the reader maybe 3 or 4 sentences to explain his main point. So then this gives us a chance to go a little bit more in depth. Maybe we could give one of his more brief examples to explain it, or give some of the characteristics of an imaginary order, or kind of define what an imaginary order is to further fill our reader in. And then continue with some of his examples and details. So for example, we could use Hammurabi's code and or the Declaration of Independence here to make our point and kind of give our reader an example to go more in depth. And then we're going to transition, right, into our own example. So we could, as we're transitioning, say something like another example that fits Harari's definition of an imagined order is, and then go on and kind of explain how it is an imagined order. And I was thinking that this would be an easy way to get your 4th body paragraph in, is to hit on those 3 requirements, it being embedded in the material world, and then there's 2 others, it shaping your wants, and I forget what the 3rd one is, but that kind of gives you then a criteria to address as you're getting to the end of the essay to explain your own point. So let me just kind of separate these so you can see them a little bit better. And so I think, that gives you kind of an easy formula to follow. I think in class, I talked about education or consumerism. I've been thinking about it more, and, I think you could look at an imagined order in another country. He talks about the Declaration of Independence and America's imagined order, but I had also kind of talked about China in our class. You could talk about a different society. Another one that I thought of too is North Korea. Some of the beliefs in North Korea are really pretty interesting if you wanted to research some of that. There's sort of this long-running myth, it is a myth, in North Korea that that they might think is kind of similar to our founding myth, but theirs is really sort of bizarre. They say that the human race actually began in North Korea, and so North Koreans are the sort of original people, and that means that they are incredibly innocent, and so that's the reason that they need sort of a supreme leader that will guide them, because they are too innocent to take care of themselves. And so it sort of justifies them having this dictator. Anyway, it's a really fascinating myth. And it does deal, with religion more than ours does. But I don't know. I find that one kind of fascinating. I was thinking too that you could potentially use this and talk about cults. A cult has their own imagined order as well. And so that kind of gives you a smaller example of an imagined order, and one that might be kind of interesting to research. So there's some other ideas for an example that you could build on. So you maybe want to do some research on that example unless you know a lot about it, and then explain how it fits the criteria of an imagined order. And I think that could be kind of a fun way to do it. All right, I've run out of time on this first video, so I'm going to stop this, and then I'll continue with some ideas on how you might argue with Harari in the second part of this lecture. Thanks.